Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here with us this afternoon to participate in the program as part of the Law and Democracy Speaker Series. My name is Isla Walker, class of 2029. I'm studying government, public policy, and film. I'm a programs assistant here at Rocky, student director of wellness at the First Generation Office, and a senator for Dartmouth Student Government. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today. Law and Democracy is a series of conversations focusing on foundational laws, policies, and institutions as we approach the semi-quincentennial milestone of the Declaration of Independence. The series builds on the Rockefellers' commitment to bringing our community together in discussion of a wide range of experts and practitioners to examine and deliberate on these themes. We are grateful to the Center for Business, Government and Society at the Tuck School of Business, Dartmouth Dialogues, the Office of the Dean of the Faculty of the Arts and Sciences, and the Office of the Associate Dean for the Social Sciences for being crucial partners in making this program happen. We would like to welcome our virtual attendees who are joining us today via live stream. For those joining us in person, when we reach the audience Q&A portion of our program, you can raise your hand and one of our student assistants will bring you a microphone. Please be sure to wait for the microphone before speaking to make sure that everyone in the room and on our live stream can hear you. As a reminder, Dartmouth is committed to protecting free expression and peaceful dissent. We encourage you to ask questions during the Q&A, but ask that you do not interfere or disrupt today's program, which would include preventing attendees from seeing or hearing our guests and moderator, or interfering with our guests and moderator's ability to speak and be heard. This conversation will be moderated by Professor Charles Wheelan, Clinical Professor of Business Administration and Faculty Director for the Center for Business, Government, and Society at the Tuck School of Business. We are honored to be joined today by Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, who most recently served as the United States Ambassador to Japan. As Ambassador, Emanuel helped deepen the U.S.-Japan alliance, including support for Japan's increased defense spending and expanded military cooperation. He promoted Japan's leadership in Indo-Pacific key security initiatives and participated in the historical trilateral summit at Camp David that reaffirmed the cooperation between the United States, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. Previously, Emanuel was the 55th mayor of the city of Chicago, a position he held until May 2019. As mayor, Emanuel added 4 years to a student's education. He increased the school day by 75 minutes and added more than 200 hours to the school year, marking the largest single increase in educational time by any city and taking Chicago from having the least education time of any large school district in the country to being on par with its peers. He implemented universal pre-kindergarten and full-day kindergarten for every Chicago child and made Chicago the first city in America to provide free community college. The mayor's comprehensive public safety strategy focused on expanding prevention programs for at-risk youth, smarter policing strategies, and empowering parents and communities to reduce violence. The ambassador made it a priority to bring global companies to the city, helping Chicago to lead the U.S. in corporate relocations and foreign direct investment for 7 consecutive years. His administration invested in infrastructure, public transportation, open space, and cultural attractions. Prior to becoming mayor, from November 2008 until October 2010, Emanuel served as President Barack Obama's chief of staff. In addition to being the president's top advisor, Emanuel helped the Obama administration secure the passage of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 and the landmark Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Before serving as chief of staff, Emanuel was elected 4 times as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Illinois' 5th Congressional District. As chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Emanuel helped pass legislation to raise the minimum wage and authored the Great Lakes Restoration Act. From 1993 to 1998, Ambassador Emanuel was a key member of President Bill Clinton's administration, rising to serve as senior advisor to the president for policy and politics. During this time, Emanuel served as a legislative liaison to Congress and spearheaded efforts to pass several of Clinton's signature achievements, most notably the federal assault weapons ban, the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, and the historic Balanced Budget Act. Emanuel also worked closely with President Joseph R. Biden Jr., then a U.S. Senator, to shepherd the Violence Against Women Act of 1994 through Congress. Emanuel graduated from Sarah Lawrence College in 1981 and received a master's degree in speech and communication from Northwestern University in 1985. He's married to Amy Rule, and they have 3 children. Ambassador Emanuel is going to give opening remarks and will then be joined by Professor Charles Wheelan for a moderated conversation, followed then by an audience Q&A. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Rahm Emanuel to the stage.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Prior to that, I was 6'2" and 250 pounds, and now I'm 5'8" and 148 dripping wet. So I want to thank you for that introduction. It was very kind to you. I want to also let you know how this all came about. 2 points before I kind of get into the higher education costs. One is, in San Diego, about a little over a month ago, it was a conference on education, and I was laying out a set of policies. But I met with your president to talk about higher education. And to her great credit, she said, I disagree with a lot of what you want, but I want you to talk about it here at Dartmouth. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but also serious, that's an example of a great leadership. That while we didn't agree on 100%, she asked me to come and speak here and lay out the ideas. I think one of the biggest things that are challenging American families today, which is higher education used to be a benefit and has turned into a massive burden. And I give her a tremendous amount of credit for the invitation, let alone to see this great campus on this beautiful time of year. Second, about 6 months ago, and I've dubbed this, I went to Mississippi, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And I call it the Hattiesburg, Mississippi to Hanover, New Hampshire tour. And the reason I went there, because if you don't know it, Mississippi now has moved from 49th to 9th in reading scores. And if you account for demographics, the state of Mississippi is number 1 in reading in America. I firmly believe that a child starts dropping out of college in 3rd grade. That if you want kids to be able to apply, sit in these seats one day in the future, you have to start, which is why was noted in my career and somewhere else in my own personal career before I went into public service, I wanted to be an early childhood educator. We made in Chicago kindergarten universal for every child full day and pre-K for every 4-year-old full day. Firmly believe in those years. I believe in them starting about 4 hours old, but that's a whole separate subject. I'll be giving that to the medical school. But on a serious note, and this journey went from elementary schools to now on higher education. I call it a grand bargain for higher education. And it's about what I said earlier, which is the cost of education today no longer is just a benefit, it's become a burden. Too many of our kids are graduating college with $30,000+ in debt as the average. And rather than a ticket to independence, it's a ticket to their parents' basement because they can't afford to live separately. If mom and dad want to sell the house, the kids and the laundry come with it. You laugh a little too hard, the parents in this room here. So the grand bargain is, in my view, pretty straightforward. For institutions, not just Dartmouth, but across the country, of very different scope. One, the whole biggest thing is I'm going to give you certainty. I think it's an absolute mistake that the President of the United States has declared war on higher education in America. A lot should change, but it's one of the great, great research entities and economic engines of this great country across different parts of this country. And I can tell you, I can see it. Probably the greatest country I learned the most about when I was in Japan wasn't Japan, was the United States. Being 8,000 miles away, 12 hours away, I could see a country in a perspective that I couldn't see when I was here. I used to say to my kids, since we're 12 hours ahead in Japan, I see Thursday. Don't worry about it. Don't get out of bed. It's not worth getting out of bed for. But on a serious note, one is certainty. No more war. We need a ceasefire as it relates to higher education. Two, that the universities across America and the colleges across America can take up to 20% of their population, grad and undergrad, you guys figure out the blend, of foreign students. As you know here, the foreign students pay full price. Third, identify 10% of savings you have for complying with the federal government. We'll stamp it, and you keep 100% of that money. But here's what you have to offer the American families in return for all those dollars and all those savings. One, if a student in high school finishes and achieves 20% college credit in high school, you offer that family the option of a 3-year BA, not just a 4-year. They don't have to take it, but that option exists. And it's open to kids who graduate high school with 20 college credits under their belt. Second, if your family earns less than $200,000, tuition is free. Third, if you make more than $200,000 as a family, tuition goes up only by CPI each year the student's there. And that's the bargain. And the truth is, below that grand bargain is a real bargain, which is that foreign students would subsidize American students. They pay full price, and the American families get a break on the price. And that, to me, is restoring an education that is a benefit and not a burden financially. College costs, and I've seen it, it was noted in my career. One of the greatest things I think I've done in my lifetime of public service, while I was proud of healthcare, universal, kid care, 10 million children. In Chicago, if you earned a B average, we gave you free community college, tuition, books, and transportation. First city to do it. And I went every year to announce the students that got it. And the look in the parents' eyes, the sense that they were no longer forced to pick between a second job or a second mortgage and their child's future. You're the lucky few. You're in a great institution here. Many parents are in the position where they have to pick which child goes ahead and which doesn't in the sense of higher education. And I don't think that should ever, ever be a determinative factor on a child's ability to achieve the American dream. It happens in education. But in addition to that B average, and one of the big reforms we make in Chicago, first and only city to do it, 50% of our kids graduated with college credit. We did it through dual credit, dual enrollment, and IB and AP. And again, I want to give a fact to you. 83% of the kids that go to Chicago public schools come from poverty or below. But we achieved 50% college credit. The other thing was you could not get your high school diploma without showing us a letter of acceptance from a college, a community college, a branch of the armed forces, or a vocational school. You were not walking graduation day until you told us where you were walking to. We got to 98% compliance on year one. We hired a ton of college career advisors and counselors. Stuff that your parents have done for you, we did in the Chicago Public Schools. And the biggest change from the early years of phonics, we'll get into it in the discussion, biggest change was revolutionizing high school education and rethinking it from a diploma-driven process where you drop you off to a college and career preparation. And that is the biggest change, which is why also, not just in our community colleges, but in this part of the plan, we call for at least getting 20 college credits to be applicable and open to the 3-year option for a BA. Driving that transformation because we lose kids, if you know, in urban areas, also across the country, not just urban. You lose them most in the high school years. Reinvigorating the high school education so you re-engage students will be the single greatest way to make sure that they're ready for the next chapter. You want to go to Marine? Great. I have 2 kids that went Navy. One full-time, the other one reserve. You want to be a machinist? You want to be a carpenter? Up to you. You want to be a nurse? Great. You want to go and be an engineer? Great. But you're going to go somewhere. You can't keep telling people 80% of the jobs require post-high school education, and we have done nothing as a country to reform our education, make it more affordable, more accessible, and more essential in 100 years. Now, my party believes as a core principle in equity. I do not know how you believe in equity and become complacent with 50% of your kids not reading at grade level. I have never seen it accomplished as an avid reader of history. We, as a country today, have 50% of our kids are not reading at grade level. And nobody, you know more, let me say it this way, you know more about the president's position on windmills than you know how he's going to approach reading. That was not meant to be a joke. He's never called an emergency meeting. By the way, no governor has, no mayor has. We have become, as a country that built on the ethos that failure is not an option, we have accepted failure as an option. We have accepted it as a norm. 50% of our kids today are not reading at grade level. Kids are graduating high school with about 18% absentee rate. Now, I believe you earn what you learn. And we have now accepted that kids aren't reading at grade level, they're graduating high school without actually knowing the basics, and they're either going to college and then dropping out and have a lifetime of debt. The whole goal from Hattiesburg to Hanover with a stop in Howell, Michigan, was whether it's vocational ed, we have a plan reforming, rather than $38 billion spent on ICE detention centers, spend $8 billion reinventing and rejuvenating our community colleges, of which there are 1,200 across the country. And then making sure higher education does not put a whole family behind the 8 ball, financially and economically. Now, I came here to talk about education. I know we'll talk about a lot of other subjects, but I want to say just to the students. Now you're going to be at the Emanuel kitchen table for dinner, so I'm sorry about that. You're a lucky few. You're at a great institution, an incredible place of higher learning. I chose public service. There's a lot of ways to do public service. If I could ask one thing of all of you, take a year of your life and dedicate it somewhere to public service. I don't mean to get your resume buffed up in Washington. That's the last place to buff up a resume, by the way. But go tutor a child. Go work in a community, clean up an environmental waste site. Do something to give something back to this great country. I believe being an American is winning the lottery ticket of life. It has been true for my family. I see it across this country in every level. You're getting one of the greatest educations the world has to give right here at Dartmouth. So if I can challenge you, it's not just to hit the milestone of graduation, but somewhere else in your life, dedicated to giving something back that has made your experience so enriching. Thank you. Leon, right here.
I sent 3 kids to Chicago Public Schools, but unfortunately it was before you were mayor, and for real, they had the shortest school day in America. They got out every day at 1:45 p.m.
Well, since that you wanted to send me that softball, yes. So when I ran for mayor, Chicago had the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States of America.
We could still get to the Cubs day games after school.
Yeah. And let me say this. Kids, high school kids, teen kids, being on the streets at 2 o'clock was not the idea of public safety, let alone public education. It was a different education, not one I would recommend. So when you add up pre-K, kindergarten, and the length of day, we added 4 years to a child's education, the largest increase ever in the history of the United States. And if I can, in the promotion of Chicago and Chicago kids, when we were done, Sean Reardon at Stanford, who's the leading demographer, called Chicago Public Schools the single best of the top 100. And a lot of educators, a lot of parents, a lot of principals, a lot of sweat equity, but time was one thing, but it changed it.
Well, you're probably not an easily triggered person, but I'm going to mention a Dartmouth grad, and then we're going to talk more generally. So Karen Lewis graduated from Dartmouth.
I'm well aware. I was going to get that. I was going to work that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that, so Karen Lewis was head of the Chicago Teachers Union, but there was this larger battle, I think.
Actually, she became a very good friend at my second term.
Okay. But if we could talk...
It took a full term for us to talk to each other.
I mean, let's talk about unions and then go back to schools. But unions are really important for working people. They provide leverage that they wouldn't otherwise have. On the other hand, whether it's McCormick Place or the public schools, they can be an impediment to change. So can you talk about that trade-off on the issues?
I want to say one thing. Your ability to spot the obvious is a gift. Yeah.
That's why I'm up here.
Yeah. So I'm mayor-elect, so if I can go through an anecdote. And Karen while she was here, was a theater major.
I did not know that.
Prior to Sarah Lawrence, I got accepted to the Joffrey Ballet School. There's a Jewish mother still in Chicago very upset that I didn't take that. And that's not a pop quiz of who that is, okay? As recently as yesterday, reminded me I could have been a ballet dancer. So our first thing, I'm not mayor even. I took her to the Joffrey Ballet. And I actually I've said this before publicly, other things. I've made my mistake that got us in. When I got us into head-to-head, at one point when we were negotiating the first contract, I said, Karen, we have the shortest school day, what are we arguing about? I'm trying to get full-day kindergarten. But that said, I made my mistakes that set her off, et cetera, appropriately. And I made those mistakes. I own them. But she was my first phone call when I get reelected. And I said to her, we can keep this up for 4 years, or we can bury the hatchet. You're my first phone call. Do you want to start a different course? And we did do that. And it's not like she gave in everything and I gave in everything, but we start that. But, you say that about unions. Let me say one thing. And I've made note of this before. I'm the one person in this room that went toe-to-toe as it relates to quote-unquote teachers. But if you fix poverty and family, don't worry about the teachers' union. No teacher for 45 minutes or an hour can solve poverty rushing through that classroom door, or a child coming from a broken family. Now, one of the things I believe, I say this both as somebody who worked on education his whole life, but also as a father of three that have, as I said, I was in the principal's office, the emergency room, or the police station. I don't want to know anything else, but at least I never made it to those three with my kids. I was the first father of don't ask, don't tell. I don't want to know. Just don't tell me. No, but on a serious note, there are three doors a child walks through that will be determinative of their life. The front door of the home, the front door of the school, and the front door of the place of worship. And if those doors are aligned, I don't care the zip code, I don't care the family history, I don't care the income. But if those three doors are aligned, that child will do well. And so I think the teachers union, in many cases, at least for mine, has been a challenge. But the bigger challenge on educational excellence are things that are outside the classroom. And I'll close on this point. 20% of a child's life is in the classroom. You want the 20% to succeed? Invest in the 80%. After-school programs, summer jobs, reading during the summer, things that we did in Chicago that amplify what's happening during that hour and 15-minute of reading and that hour and 15-minute of math.
So bigger picture, how would you buff and polish the Democratic narrative to emphasize those things without being perceived as a party that has cobbled together a series of programs? I mean, give me the theme that ties it together, that makes it more attractive to the American people.
All right, well, everybody get out your sleeping bags because I'm going to be here for an hour.
Well, then it's not the narrative.
No, well, look, our party did lose the plot. I'm sorry. Our party during COVID is one example and one anecdote, or I'll give you two. Our party said, follow the science. Well, within 4 months, it was very clear kids were not having the mortality anywhere close to the mortality rate of adults. We kept schools closed for 2 years because it was politically convenient. I was neither a mayor or governor, and trust me, I would not have been quiet about it. It was self-evident. And the data shows today, I'm not saying kids from a red state versus a blue state, but since that's the metaphor, kids in red states are, while also behind, are less behind than kids from blue state. That data is set. And we were the party of science, and we refused to follow it. Within 4 months, we knew COVID was not having the dramatic impact on kids. Mortality or sickness, just a fact. We didn't do it. Now, I said this coming back from Tokyo. I'll probably get booed. I don't really care. I don't. Don't talk to me about bathroom and locker room access when we should be talking about classroom excellence. We lost the plot. Now, I happen to think Republicans walked away from public schools with no sense of accountability to dollars, and our party walked away from accountability and standards, and our kids are falling through the cracks. Now, if you go all the way back, it's not actually a COVID issue. In 2012, when we abandoned Leave No Child Behind, pause, put a pin in it, teachers were not wrong, we were teaching to the test. They were not. But the answer wasn't to abandon the test. The answer was to make an adjustment so that the test became a means to measure and influence education. There's a video I put out on my social media. If you're bored for 90 seconds, you can go look at it. But there's a principal in Hattiesburg. Like in Mississippi, they've ripped through this. They test as a way to improve the education. And we walked away from it. And it happened in 2012. And the idea wasn't to abandon it, was to tweak it and reform it. And we did. Now, I don't believe, I'm not an education reformer. I believe in educational excellence, and I refuse to accept mediocrity. And the Democrats, if you do the politics then, Jimmy Carter sets up the Department of Education. Bill Clinton does public school choice and teachers of excellence. President Obama does race to the top. We have a 20-point advantage on education as a party of the trust. And through COVID, we blow it out. Now, because of what President Trump has done, we're back to about an 8 or 9 point. But we had a historic 20-point advantage. And the party better get back to actually stop worrying about a school being named after Abraham Lincoln and start worrying about whether kids know why Abraham Lincoln is an icon. We lost what matters. You sent your kids to public schools. Parents move neighborhoods to get a good education. Parents take kids on trips to see what colleges they want to go to. It is one of the biggest drivers for families. And we walked away because it was just politically too hard. As you can tell, I have a theory of what too hard looks like. I'd like to get into that too.
I think maybe the only harder issue is healthcare. I just finished teaching a class. I signed a Wall Street Journal article about the argument between you and your brother Zeke over the Affordable Care Act. If I recall correctly, Zeke wanted more cost control and quality changes. And where do we have to go on the Affordable Care Act?
Let me say this, as somebody that has far better bedside manners than Zeke, I know a little more.
I've met Zeke. Zeke's come here before, and Ari.
All I want to say is, don't do this. Don't do this. But since I passed the kid health care for President Clinton and ACA for President Obama, slightly more health care legislative experience than my wonderful brother. Okay.
He's the one with the PhD, though.
It's not worth the paper. No.
I think, if you look at the cost increases.
Why don't we get back to education rather than family issues, okay?
A little on health care, because we are going to have to do something on the spending side. And the Democrats are in an interesting place in that the Republicans want to repeal and replace, but there's no replacement. And so,
again,
somebody's going to have to deal with the cost increases.
You got to deal with cost increase. You also got to deal with the fact that you have insurance companies and teleservices making decisions that overruling doctors and nurses. There's no healthcare professional that will tell you today they don't spend 50% of their time arguing with insurance companies who have actually superseded. Then number two, I can't believe, please, whatever you do, do not tell Zeke that I'm quoting him. Please do not do that. But actually, we reward failure. And what I mean by that, we send people to hospitals rather than let doctors make the decision to treat them in the office, which will save a huge amount of money. Third, we did this in Chicago. We had the largest prevention program. And what I mean by that is what's called wellness. Look, 8% of our city employees, and we had a lot, close to about 100,000 across all the systems. 8% of the population was driving 65% of the costs over 6 basic illnesses. We got everybody a life coach. your smoking, diabetes, or weight, or 2 of those, or 3 of those, or 4 of the others. You had to work on changing the behaviors, et cetera. And that was, we saved over the span, if you did kind of office and management and budget talk, $450 million from what was expected to be spent because we controlled costs. And that's what you're going to have to do.
We're going to leave some time for Q&A, but let's go across the Pacific. You've come back from Japan.
You kind of left the kids in 3rd grade all alone. Okay, but go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
the world is a busy place at the moment. So just help us, based on your experience in Japan as ambassador, give us a framework for thinking about this relationship with China as you've seen it from the White House, from Congress, and more recently from the other side of the Pacific.
Well, like I got 6 parts to this. So from a national security, look, our message is we are a permanent Pacific power and presence, and you can bet long on us. Their message, we're the rising power, they're the declining power. Either you get in line or you're going to get the treatment. That's it. I know there's a lot of schools of foreign policy, but that's basically it. My theory, and I was an advocate for this, and was isolate the isolator. What China wants to do to Vietnam is isolate them, and then through economic, military, political, coerce them to lose their sovereignty and be dependent. In the introduction, you noted one of the things I was very proud of was helping Japan, Korea, and the United States at Camp David, this historic meeting. China lives to make sure that all 3 of us never get on the same page. That was a bad day for China. Isolate the isolator. When the United States, through the Quad, through the trilateral with Korea, Japan, and the United States, the trilateral between the Philippines, the United States, and Japan, we are isolating them in their own backyard. And they screamed about it. They knew what we were doing because it was effective. So before you get to China, there's a thing called allies. I'm sitting here a week ago. Korea and Japan met without the United States. That is, we are isolated through the stupidity of our foreign policy being executed. If you want to call it foreign policy, I'm putting some lipstick on a pig right now. And that's a big thing for a Jewish kid to call a pig. But it's unbelievable what we've done to ourselves, and by choice. Second is, I want to say this, and I'm not scared of China. I'm scared of this country not doing what's in the interest of this country. China's got nothing on us. China doesn't decide whether 50% of our kids don't read at grade level, and we're okay with it. We decide. China doesn't decide whether we're going to have a budget that cuts 40% of the NIH, 30% of the National Science Foundation, or fire the Science Board. We decide. China doesn't decide whether we leave an energy system dependent only on oil and gas without geothermal, SMR nuclear, battery storage. We decide. We are so involved in our Hunger Games of our politics, they're only winning because we've defaulted. We are sleepwalking into the future. So when you say China, there's a geostrategic piece to this. And there's an economic competitiveness. When you look at our foreign policy, there are 4 tools in the national security toolbox: military power, political persuasion, economic statecraft, and cultural attraction. Today, America's reduced its entire national security toolbox to military. We're unpopular across the globe. We're not a politically attractive place. We decided through tariffs to end economic statecraft and engagement. That's on us. And so maybe somebody will one day call me naive. I don't know. I look forward to it. But I'm not naive. I think China is a challenge. But it's a challenge only because we have decided to forfeit the game. Now, I don't just say this. So one, I've laid out, I want to be clear, from pre-K to BA, and today's the BA plan. If you look at American history, land-grant colleges, universal high school education, GI Bill, science and tech. The one through line of the greatest periods of economic growth in America was education. And we have basically accepted that we're going to compete the future with one hand tied behind our back. Number two, may not make me also in the dorms popular here, but I have called for a 10% tax on the predictive markets and online sport gaming. And it all goes into the National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, and Dartmouth, the Defense Department. And double the size of our research dollars. And make sure also you reform the tax credit for R&D because corporations are fleecing it and playing games with it. Hold on, I'm just getting started, brother. I'll be laying out soon an energy plan and digital plan to invest in the infrastructure of the country. But I really say this because I used to sit here, I learned a tremendous amount of Japan. Kids 5 years old walk to school by themselves across all the country. We've stolen our childhood from our kids in this country. But I learned a lot about the Indo-Pacific. I learned a lot about Japan. I learned the most about America. And I will tell you, as ambassador, I sat here and I didn't recognize this country. We would never, ever accept a 50% failure rate on reading. We would tie ourselves in knots. We have never, and you're a recipient of this, and I'm not trying to play here, but 40% cut of National Institute of Health. There's a new drug that we developed through the NIH funding that is probably the biggest breakthrough in cancer treatment. Everybody wants to model themselves across the globe on our research and development, and we're cutting it. China's doubling. That's on us, not on them.
So one other piece of that economic toolkit, presumably, is trade. So how should the United States, and maybe more specifically the Democratic Party, think about trade?
Well, if you can afford the paywall at the Wall Street Journal, I wrote about that, but
I know it comes free with the tuition, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You get through the library.
I hope you accept, repeat students here. So, look, again, this, like we did on teacher testing, which was either do it or don't, which is a mistake. So under trade, all trade deals were great, and then we've gone through two administrations, President Biden and President Trump. All trade deals are bad, which is a mistake. And what I mean by that is you can't go multilateral or bilateral. Like with Europe, on critical minerals and materials, and on emerging technologies, I would do an economic agreement. They have to figure out magnets like we got to figure it out. And no disrespect, but I'm probably going to also get yelled at. I don't want to debate wine and tie something up for 2 years. Cheese either. I'm not interested in that. China owns the world on critical minerals and on magnets. We have a self-interest with our European allies working and solving that. We have a self-interest working with them on fusion and leapfrogging China on the next energy. There's other things that critical materials and critical emerging technologies that we could be working together. I would also do that with our allies in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific region. So narrow the trade discussion to what is essential. And it's not wrong by the American people. And if you ask me, let me take a step back. The four biggest things that changed our politics was in the last 25 years. Iraq, we went to war on a lie, and everybody responsible for that lie never paid a price. 4 years later, we had the greatest financial meltdown. 7 million Americans lost their home, and bankers were saying, I deserve a bonus. I think they deserve something else. 4 years later, China was Xi, and they're violating the WTO, and we let Battle Creek, Michigan fight Beijing all by themselves. And then there's COVID. And those four things tell you why the American people lost confidence in all of us, and Moi included. Because we walked away from them, and we left them on their own. And the people responsible for having lied and or did something really bad were never held accountable and never actually paid a price, either career-wise or professionally, for that. And to me, the way to restore some political confidence in trade is not only investing, so if somebody wants to you want to be an electrician, You want to be an engineer or you want to be an educator? The education system makes sure you can do that. You want to go and become, in another way, a carpenter, somebody in cybersecurity, or you want to do caregiving, but an education system that meets that. Every field, doctors, electricians, pipe fitters, carpenters, cybersecurity, we're short. And nobody's talking about an education system that reforms that. So to me, that's how you build an economic system that invests in people, invest in this country, and they will be able to engage the world on a very targeted trade and economic statecraft.
That's a good lead into my last question before we go to questions. There'll be microphones out there, which is a lot of students, I assume, would like to go out and do the public service you talk about, but they've also lived through a period. They lived through everything you've described. Iraq, the financial crisis, there's been this profound loss of faith in institutions, in political parties, in government, in the Catholic Church. So how, offer them a message of hope in light of 18 or 22 years where we haven't put on our best face as the adults in the room.
Look, I'm not going to lie to you. That's number one, which is this is going to take a generation to restore it. I'm not going to flip a switch. You'd be a fool to listen to that. It's going to take a generation for all of us together. I happen to think, let me break the news to you. Hunger Game politics is not it. We're spending time on redistricting, and they're spending time on research in China. Which do you think is going to serve the future better? Redistricting or research? Okay? So to me, or building monuments to oneself, okay? So to me, we're building an arch and they're building AI models. This is insane. So I don't think it's just hope. I happen to think, know your place. And what I mean by that is, you are fortunate. I don't know everybody in this room. I don't know all the students' background, and I'm sure there's hardship. But you are one of the lucky few. You owe this country something. Now, a week ago, said if you do 2 years of national service, we will give you the money for a down payment on a home. The era of something for nothing is over. You earn it by opportunity with some sense of responsibility to the country. And having those values again, where the elite don't turn their back and take care of themselves and leave everybody else holding the bag. The 4 peaks I talked about, the one common theme is, you have people that were responsible, for me, prior to Iran, the single worst foreign policy mistake in American history, built on yellow cake in Niger that never existed, and they knew it. They're at universities teaching. They write opinion pieces like somebody cares about their opinion. You're lucky. We lost 5,000 fellow Americans. 45,000 are wounded and maimed for life. We spent $1 trillion on the deserts of Iraq, built on a lie. I don't really care what you have to say. I just want to hear, I'm sorry. The same thing, and this was one of the big disputes President Obama and I had when I worked for him, is 7 million Americans lost their homes on a thing called liar loans. Get the theme yet? And bankers were asking for a bonus when they should have gotten a 2x4. So I'm not here to tell you hope. I'm here to tell you this is going to take us all collectively rolling up our sleeves, some sweat equity, understanding America's worth fighting for at every different level. And by contributing something, you're going to also do one thing. You're going to learn something about yourself. You're going to have given something. And I will just, I want to close on this before I take the questions from the students and the academics and the community here. So when I was mayor, every month at City Council, we swore in new American citizens. So when I'm ambassador, within the first 4 weeks, they said, we know from your record this is what you did as mayor. Will you go down, I think it was the Ronald Reagan at that point, or the Abraham Lincoln. It's the only place in the world where there's a permanent aircraft carrier from America based, and that's in Japan. We like to swear in new citizens. I said, great. I didn't really kind of think about it. Like, I'm going to a U.S. aircraft carrier and I'm swearing. Well. So there were 17 American people 11 countries, 3 continents. They had earned their citizenship by serving in the American Armed Forces. They believed in this incredible place called America. They gave something of themselves to something they weren't really part of. They risked their lives in service of America. So I'm not going to tell you, hopefully, through national service, you restore your confidence in America. But I do think you'll restore your threads of a community. You cannot have a country this diverse without a foundation we believe in. I saw it firsthand on the Abraham Lincoln that has 5,000 plus American citizens and sailors. That diversity of that 5,000 plus was strengthened because there was a foundation that they all shared as a community. That's what national service will do. And from that, we can rebuild America.
Terrific. All right, on that note, we will take questions. We'll start with students if we can. So where are my microphones here? All right, right down here. There you go.
Can you just do me one thing, just say your name also?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Cooper. I'm a first-year student here at Dartmouth, and I'm a policy debater here. It was my path towards college.
Okay.
And my question is about that, and it has 2 elements. First is to foreground things. Debate has been proven in various studies in urban debate leagues to improve reading and math scores. It's consistent, it's true. However, it's gotten to be under attack from somewhat of both sides of the political spectrum. One being that debate teaches you how to win too much and we should instead favor conversations. Not to disfavor them, in my opinion, I like them too, but debate is important as well. Second is you have actors like James Fishback, currently running for governor in Florida, actively doxing debaters over their freedom of speech. Now, what can we do to revitalize debate in America and institutionalize it to make it more relevant in the lives of youth? And now, secondarily, the second part of my question is more to do with the policy of everything. The fact that debate has been proven to be uniquely effective in raising scores is a statement that techniques in education matter, sometimes more than money. How can we make sure the techniques we institute in educational reforms are able to address the problems of students, not just with money? Thank you.
Are you shocked he's a debater?
No. I was just hoping he didn't ask me for citations of the Talmud. Cooper, that's a, okay, got it. It's a thing. Well, I'll get you my rabbi's number then. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the question. The second part, let me address. I'd be open to looking at research on the influence of debate. I don't know that. So if you got research, I'd be open to looking at that, reading that. All right. But you aren't wrong, and in fact, you are right about how to spend money. Now, the reason I went to Hattiesburg, Mississippi is because they reoriented their entire education system around phonics, the science of reading. California way outspends on a per capita basis Mississippi, not just for inflation and cost of living, just way outspends it. California doesn't do, or Illinois for that matter, phonics. So how you spend your money is not just more money. And one of the challenges Democrats is there is no problem that we don't think about putting money towards. And I'll give you one example out of my own experience. And I know you'll find this hard to believe, but I really do well in this story, okay? At our community colleges in Chicago, the mayor has direct oversight. You appoint the chancellor, blah, 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 and the board. We spend, or did, $40 million a year of a 580 budget on remedial education, on math and reading. So I said, I'm going to take $5 million and give free community college if you got a B average. Because if you were doing a B average, I didn't have to teach you reading and math. So I wanted to reward success rather than ensure failure. So how you spend money, you're absolutely correct. Beyond Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Tennessee all replicate the Mississippi model, the whole thing, not just one thing. And they've all seen a hockey stick in reading. So more money, and look, there are kids from poverty backgrounds where more resources are needed versus kids from a high income. That's why I talk about the 3 doors a child walks through. But how you spend that money, where it is spent, what you're expected, and then holding a system accountable for that is correct as a premise. Doesn't mean on everything, but I agree on that, on the point on education. And if you had something that was on debate that you had a piece of paper, that young guy looking at his telephone rather than listening, he works for me. He doesn't really care what I have to say. If you can get him that paper, I'd love to look at it. Okay.
All right, another student question right up here in front, all the way down.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Badushi, I'm a junior. I wanted to ask a little bit more about a plan that you referenced in your opening statements about foreign students subsidizing American students in college. At first impression, it sounds like that could kind of squeeze socioeconomic diversity out of the foreign students that are applying to schools here, and so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
No, that's a great question, and thank you for the follow-up. What I said, and again, that a school, I think here, don't know exact the fact, but from meeting with your president, I think Dartmouth is 12 to 14% of your students are foreign. I'm saying that a school, and the Trump administration says you can go to 15, but they come with all this war, et cetera. I'm saying you can go up to 20. I don't care whether it's grad, undergrad, et cetera. You figure out the blend. Sometimes there's small schools that just don't have a graduate program. But those foreign students, by and large, almost 100%, pay the full rate. And when you gave a college, or you gave a university, or you give rather, the confidence that they can accept up to 20%, the full rate allows you to offer the discounts to the American families. That, to me, would be the trade. You get certainty, no war by the president or on the universities and places of higher education. Families would have the option of a 3-year BA, not a 4. 200 below in income, you get, which is 80% of the American families, would get free tuition. And above 200, they would get whatever it is freshman year, but no greater than CPI each year after that. That gives families certainty too. Now, I appreciate the fact that you say you get a diversity of students from across the globe, but if you look at all the research which is out there, foreign students, which have dropped dramatically, have cost the universities across America a little over $1.5 billion. I want to give that certainty. And again, well over 90% of them are paying the full tuition today, anyway.
All right, well, we go right here also.
They said last question, I'll take this and 2 more and then. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Sabik. I'm a senior at Dartmouth College. A lot of people criticize the Democratic Party right now as being
You've noticed.
more responsive to donors than to working class voters. You're one of the biggest fundraisers during your time in DC as a House member and as a White House staffer. Do you think that is a valid criticism of past leaders like you, and why?
Okay, well, let me say this. If I was raising money in the White House, I'd be breaking the law. And the one thing I'm proud about in my record, I've never hired a lawyer. Got close a couple times, but never did it. But to the larger share, the thrust of your question is totally fair. Yeah, I was responsible for helping make Nancy Pelosi Speaker. I ran the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. It's in my bio. And I'm really proud that she was Speaker. And part of the job was to make sure the Democrats who were running in districts that were held by a Republican were economically and financially competitive. I make no bones about it. I played by all the rules that are set up, and I raised money and resources online, as well as at high-end events, to give Democrats a competitive edge so they would not be outspent. Make no bones about it. Now, I did that. Last time there was a raise in the minimum wage was when we were in the majority and I was caucus chair. Didn't impact that. When I was caucus chair, number 4, when we became majority, we sent a bill to President Bush's desk for 10 million kids to get health care. Didn't change that. So I understand the thrust of the question about money. Look at the policy. I raised money when I ran for mayor. B students got free community college. 40,000 kids got free pre-K. 40,000 kids got free kindergarten, universal. So the question isn't about the money. The question is what you do when you're in office. It's the other half of that question. And so I make no bones about electing a Democratic majority, no bones about replacing Denny Hastert with Nancy Pelosi. Very proud I did it.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Can I do one thing?
Yeah, well, I'm going to thank you for your public service, both in Chicago,
go
where
ahead.
I'm from, and on behalf of us in Japan. But yes, you get one more comment.
Somebody told me there was a room where there was an overflow. I don't know if there is. If there is, I will go there to say thank you to the folks there. If there isn't, I don't have to do that. I want to thank you for wasting an hour of your time here. So I appreciate it.
And it's a
Thank
very
you.
nice day, so you should be flattered. Thank you very much.